morning. It is so good to see you today here at service. Welcome to Redeemer's Church. Hey, if this is your first time here, I'd like to invite you to fill out the communication card that you can find just right under the seat in front of you. You can fill it out and turn it in at the offering receptacles on your way out after service, or you can drop it off at the information center, which is at the gazebo outside in the quad area. And if you turn it in there, you will get a Redeemer's Church mug and also a voucher for a Missio Day coffee. You can also find the form online at redeemerschurch.com/new. If you take a screenshot of that form, you can show the barista at Missio Day and you will also get a free drink. We also have a Redeemer's Church app and you can download that right now if you have not already done so. Just head to redeemerschurch.com and right on the homepage, just scroll down and there's a link for you to download the app there. With the app, you will be able to follow along with today's sermon notes, check out the events going on throughout the week, and you can also give online at any time. And some other ways that we have for you to give at your convenience are the offering receptacles located at the front entrance of the worship center, or you can utilize our text to give feature. Again, we are also grateful that you are joining us this morning.
Hey Redeemers family, Edgar here, and I have an exciting update on our summer camp. I am so happy to announce that we have 40 students registered and ready to go to summer camp, and right now we are still getting more. With that being said, we need your support to be able to send as many students up there to experience the love of God like never before. Here are 3 ways you can help support. The first involves sponsoring a student to go to camp. Camp this year is $300, but with your generous support, we can be able to send a student worry-free. You can do this by going to redeemerschurch.com/give, and on the tab, scroll all the way down to Summer Camp Student Ministries, and you can give at your convenience there. The second option is supporting our first ever Tea for Teens golf tournament taking place on June 11th here at Dinuba Ridge Creek Golf Club. You can do this by either becoming a whole sponsor, signing up to just golf, or you can also donate some raffle prizes. Any way you want to give is available. Again, June 11th is our golf tournament, and we would love to see you there. The third and final option is becoming a leader for camp. You can head on up there with us to support and mentor each student in their walk with Christ. You can also just take kids up there and bring them on back if you can't make it for the weekend. Again, we're so excited for summer camp to happen in just a couple weeks. We would love your support to be able to continue to send more and more students to experience the love of God like never before. Until then, summer vibes.
Hi, my name is Lilia.
Hi, my name is Natalia.
Hi, my name is Carolina.
And I'm a teen mom.
And I'm a teen mom.
And I'm a teen mom.
The Teen Moms program impacted me in such an amazing way. I feel like I got happier when I got here.
I get to interact with other girls. It's a positive environment with other moms.
And now as being a mother and still being a teen, it helped me learn how to grow up and mature more.
2 reasons that I really do like is that I get to talk to the moms about everything.
Food boxes, taking you out with your babies to learn how to cook. And then they also include God, how He's watching out for us. I just love it here.
My life without the Teen Mom program.
So without the Teen Moms program,
I mean, I couldn't really imagine it.
I would be struggling if I didn't have the help.
I wouldn't feel as amazing as I would feel without it. I think I'd still be in a very dark place.
Our teens and mentors worked hard yesterday to bake treats to raise money for the annual Teen Mom Retreat. Thank you so much for letting us come and share with you. And thank you for showing your support for these young moms who have made a difficult and courageous choice to raise their baby many times in difficult circumstances. We will be at the table at the end of the service with our bricks, brochures, and sign-up sheets if you are interested in serving or learning more about CYM. We look forward to seeing you.
I thought I had a bumper. Hey, good morning, everybody. Good morning. You all ready for the word? Yeah. Can we do something? Thank you. I am too. Can we do something before I get started? I just want us to pray, and I want you to join me. I want you to kind of center your thoughts on God this morning. Have you ever had those days you wake up and you're just like scatterbrained and overwhelmed, and you're just like, dude, I don't know. I'm feeling out of sorts. I can't find my left shoe, everything's going wrong, just the little things. So if you'll join me, if you'll just pray with me, I feel a little scattered this morning, and I want to just kind of center on God. I want us to join there, and we'll get going in the Word. Lord God, Lord, we pray that we come here to church. Everybody's come here for different things, different reasons, Lord, with different issues and different things going on in life and just the craziness of this life that we have. Lord, sometimes it feels like that all converges at once to this heavy weight that so many people have to carry. And so, Lord, I pray that today is a time that we can just come and stop, to be silent, to be still, to listen to your word, to find refreshment in it, to find joy in it, challenge in it, to get our mind on the thing that matters most. Lord, I pray for our time together, Lord, that you would just help us to put everything aside, to be present with you, to make our lives and our moment and our mind and our thoughts just centered on who you are, God. And Lord, that your word would be rich. Lord, that there are things that we would usually just skip over that today, Lord, that you would just reveal to every single person here. I don't care if they're a new Christian or non-Christian or been in church forever, Lord, I pray that you would just work beyond anything I can do, beyond any clarity I can give, Lord, that your spirit would work in each person now to, Lord, to show them what they needed to hear this week, to see your comfort, your challenge, your encouragement, your love in your word. In Jesus' name, amen. So are you ready for the word? All right. I got a weird one for you. You ready for that one? We're going to be in Leviticus 20. Yeah, everybody's favorite. It's going to be good. We're going to be in Leviticus 20, so if you'll stand for the reading of the word. We're going to be starting in verse 22. It's going to be a weird one, so if you're new to Redeemers or new-ish, hang with us. This is a different type of verse, but I promise I'll explain it and why we're reading it. I lied to you, I have to confess. I lied to you 2 weeks ago and said it was my last in the series on the law, and then I'd get back in the Sermon on the Mount, and then, it's not, because I discovered something I wanted to talk about before I get, next week I promise I'll get back into the Sermon on the Mount. But I just changed gears this week as I thought about what I really felt like we needed to hear before we get into the rest of what Jesus has to teach us in the Sermon on the Mount. So today we're going to talk about, it does apply as almost a preface to what's coming in the next few weeks as we go back in. But we're going to start here. So let's read Leviticus 20, and here's what it says. God is saying to his people, God's people in the desert in the Old Testament in Leviticus, he says, keep all my decrees and laws and follow them, so that the land where I am bringing you to live may not vomit you out. Yum. You must not live according to the customs of the nations I am going to drive out before you, because they did all these things, and I abhorred them. But I said to you, you will possess the land. I will give it to you as an inheritance, a land flowing with milk and honey, just amazing blessing. I am the Lord your God, who has set you apart from the nations. You must therefore make a distinction between clean and unclean animals, and between clean and unclean birds. Do not defile yourselves by any animal or bird or anything that moves along the ground, those that I have set apart as unclean for you. You are to be holy to me, because I, the Lord, am holy, and have set you apart from the nations to be my own. This is the word of the Lord. All right, so it's a weird one. And this is just a smidgen of the weirdness of Leviticus, and I'm going to share more of it today, because it goes into all these distinctions between certain things you have to keep separate, and there's and these are called holiness laws. And in this, Jesus says, you are to be holy as I am holy. And we don't really know what that means. Like, we have an idea, you've probably heard it, holier than thou. Well, that person thinks they're so holy. It usually has to do with about moral perfectionism and being better, being cleaner. And there is a piece within holiness that is that, but it's so much deeper. And the reason I pulled this out is because we've been, if you haven't been here, we've been in the Sermon on the Mount all year. We took a little sidebar because Jesus talked about the law, and he said, I didn't come to get rid of the Old Testament, to get rid of the law. I came to fulfill it. And then he says, nothing is going to pass away. All of this still matters. And that's why we've been in it, is what does it mean then? If he says the law hasn't disappeared, but there's all these weird things, how do we make sense of that today? That's what we've been doing for like 6 weeks. The interesting thing about this is that portion of Scripture starts a new section of teaching for Jesus. So if you go into Matthew 5, which is what we've really been in all year, just one chapter, this is like a bookend, and it starts with talking about the law. The next few weeks, we're going to cover these very specific things that sound like commandments, like about murder, anger, adultery, enemies, money, the poor, all of these like deep, hard things. And I'm like, we should have an understanding of why this matters before we get into these harder conversations. But so he starts with the law, teaches these commandments, and at the very end of this section of teaching, he closes with this statement: you are to be perfect because I am perfect. And you go, dang, this is where I get off the bus. I can't be perfect. But see, he's quoting from the Old Testament, you are to be holy as I am holy. He changes the verb, and we'll talk about why. All right? One thing I want us to focus on, though, is what it says in Leviticus, and we're going to come back to Jesus here in a sec, but he says, keep all these laws so that the land where I am bringing you to live may not vomit you out. Isn't that a great metaphor? And this might be, if you're new to faith, you might be like, dude, this God sounds mean. And that's what I've been trying to do in this whole series, is to show why this actually makes sense, okay? Here's what he's saying. Here's the background. He's sending them into a place where this culture, this group that they're going to take over this land from, it's a hard thing to swallow because they're a group of people but they're doing abhorrent things. These are people known for worshiping other gods, but more so, they're sacrificing babies. They have just crazy practices that are really dark and really evil. And he's saying, I'm going to give you this land, but you are to live so different from the way these people lived, because they did stuff that is so contrary to the way God has made us, to the way the world is supposed to work. And they've destroyed themselves. And it's like, if you live, what happens, guys, what makes us vomit? Did anybody know, other than hard drinking? Virus. Alcohol, eating something that's spoiled. What happens is you introduce something that was never meant to your body, that is foreign, that is wrong, that doesn't belong, and your body rejects it out, right? God has designed the world to work in a way that isn't just so you have to do good things, but that it actually blesses you, that it nurtures you, that it keeps you mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually healthy. And we try to do things so contrary that our life sometimes vomits us out. I thought it was a great expression of how I felt the last few weeks. And here's a story that I hope you can resonate with. I have been having conversation after conversation after conversation with families and people and men, including myself, and the conversations are all the same. So if I talk to you, this is not about you, because literally it is 20 conversations. But it's about people saying, oh man, I am so overwhelmed. I have such anxiety. Like I just, everything is converging. It is just like, seems like one thing after another. It never seems to stop. My older kids are acting like buffoons. They won't work. They won't do anything. Should I kick them out? Should I keep them? My younger kids, they are doing 100 things and they won't stop. And all they need to do is just constantly be active. And I just feel so overwhelmed. And then just add on top of it, I got physical things and I got health things and I got work things. And I know that's nobody here, but that's what's going on out there. Anybody resonate? The convergence of just like, ugh, I'm so overwhelmed. It's like the land is vomiting us out, just like it is just, this isn't the way it was supposed to be, right? And so what's interesting is a common theme is psychosomatic illness. And people know it. They're like, I'm having random pains everywhere. I actually met a guy who throws up, not because he's sick, but because he's so overwhelmed. Because he is so anxious with his life. And so I sat with people day after day in the last month, and they keep sharing the story. But here's what is notable. Not that there's a malady. We all kind of see that in society. This is the interesting thing, is that when I go, dang, man, I get you. I feel you. What are we going to do? It's not even that they're like, I don't know what to do. I can tell that they've never even asked the question, maybe I should do something radically different. Maybe I should change the very structure of my life. We haven't even thought about it. We've just accepted that this is the way my mentality, my spirituality, my family, and my world and my time is supposed to work. And you realize it's just dawning on them, to do something different. Yeah, there's got to be something radically different because we're doing something completely foreign to the way we were built emotionally, spiritually, and relationally. And it's spitting us out. Our lives are in upheaval. Our lives are in upheaval. So when we look at God's people, Israel wanted to keep God's promises. They wanted to love God, but as soon as they get into this land and the whole story of the Bible, they end up doing what everybody else was doing. They end up worshiping other gods. They end up doing all their practices, and you know what happens to them is the land ends up spitting them out. They get overtaken by other countries. They get put into slavery. They are overwhelmed. They are burdened. Their families split. Everything falls apart because they wanted to do what everyone else did, and yet they wanted to love God as well. And I think that's our lives in a nutshell. I don't really want to be different. I want everybody to know that I'm uniquely lovable, but I don't want anybody to think I'm different. Anybody? Like, I don't want anybody to look at me like I don't belong to the whole social success story of our world, but I want them to know I'm super different than everybody, but not. And we live in this tension, right? We didn't really ever graduate from high school, did we? There's this section of laws in Leviticus, and these are called holiness laws. And there are a bunch of prohibitions. Some of them you might go, yeah, that's good. Then you're going to get to some and go, wow, that's weird. And then you're going to get to some, which I'll share today, and you go, see, Nick, you don't even do these. But the whole point is not about the weirdness and the specificities of these laws. It's about, are you a people who is different and doesn't represent these people who are living lives that the land is vomiting them out, that's falling apart? Are you living in a way that people will look at you and see a different way? And this way to live is one that will make you whole, not sick. This way to live isn't about making God happy so that you don't get smited. It's actually a way designed for you so that you are healthy and whole. Will you follow this way? So we get to Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount, and he's saying the same thing. Be perfect as I am perfect. But that word perfect is a Greek word that's teleos. And it means to be complete and whole, not perfect as in I am morally great at everything. It means I am mature, I am completed, and I am whole. I am not divided. And that's the malady of our world, is we are so pulled in 1,000 directions with no commitments that we can sustain. And it's overwhelming. And he says, I want you to be whole, fully devoted, whole, made whole like I am whole in God. So today's message is called Holy, Holy, Holy. It is the law of holiness. We're going to talk about what holiness is. How are we made whole? So Jesus is pointing back to this law of God. It's in the Sermon on the Mount. And he says this, again, it's a bookend between, I have come to fulfill the law, nothing is disappearing, all of the stuff still matters, and you are to be perfect as I am perfect. And everything in between is a challenge where he says, I know you have heard it said, don't murder. But I say, and you would hope he would go, you're okay if you do some things because grace. But he goes, no, you're murdering even if you get angry. He ups the ante. The whole thing about the Sermon on the Mount so far, if you were with us at the beginning of the Beatitudes, was there is a different way that a believer lives. You are to be peacemakers in a world that is angry and divided all the time. You are to be poor in spirit in a world that wants to look like they got it all together, like they're hot stuff. You are to empty yourself and serve the poor in a world that says you need to make everything about achievement. He says everything is so different in the way a believer lives. You are set apart. You are different. And so this goes into that same idea. Is, yeah, you're saying, oh, I follow the laws of the world. But he's like, no, but you're called to something much greater, and it goes much deeper than murder. It goes into how are you as a person internally with God and with others. God's holiness is rooted in this concept that you are to be set apart, undivided in your love, undivided in your devotion, in such a way that others look in and realize that this is the path to wisdom, salvation, and wholeness. It's an amazing calling. See, we often think about holy people as holier than thou. I'm challenging you to not have somebody in your head right now. Who do you know? It pops in your head. Somebody that's holy. They are so much better than others. That's not what this is talking about. There's a passage in Deuteronomy that I think will help you see this a little clearer, what God intended and what he calls holiness and what its purpose is. It is not for you to be so different that you can look at people and go, you're not like me. You're not as good as I am. That is not the point. Anybody who's doing that has missed the point of what Jesus teaches completely, entirely. So if you know somebody who's holier than thou, they are going to be vomited out of the land. Okay? Because they are not living within what God has made them to live. Here's what this says, and I want you to see it. Deuteronomy 4 says this, "See, I have taught you decrees and laws as the Lord my God commanded me." Again, he's talking to his people in Israel. He's given them all these laws to be different. "And I have taught you all these laws that the Lord has commanded me," says Moses, "so that you may follow them in the land you are entering and take possession of it. Observe them carefully, for this will show your wisdom and understanding to the nations, who will hear about all these decrees and say, 'Surely this great nation is wise and understanding people.' What other nation is so great as to have their gods near them the way the Lord our God is near us whenever we pray to him? And what other nation is so great as to have such righteous decrees and laws as this body of laws I am setting before you today? Only be careful and watch yourself closely so that you do not forget the things your eyes have seen or let them fade from your heart as long as you live. Teach them to your children and to their children after them." He's saying, I want you to observe these laws because it will make you whole. And when you're whole, all these people are going to look in and go, we're not whole. We're being vomited out. How do we get close to this God that you have? There's such wisdom. There's such greatness. There's such goodness. The only way, God, it wasn't about creating people who were better than everybody else. It was always about that other people would look in and be made whole by God because of the way his people are being changed by him. Do you see that? See, if you're holier than thou, you've separated yourself to a point where you say, you're not good enough to be around me. But if you're being made holy, set apart, changed by God, living your life differently, it is so that people will look in and go, my life is a mess. How can I get close to this God? I see that your life is a mess, but you found some joy. How can I draw close to this? Where's the wisdom? I think one of the reasons when I ask people, when they go, Nick, my life's fallen apart, we're overwhelmed, we're constantly anxious, we have all these physical, psychosomatic illnesses, and I go, well, what are you going to do about it? And I realize they've never even thought about a major shift in life, at least nothing crazy like changing the way we do family and the way we do church and the way we do life. It's because they've actually never seen a model. Everybody's suffering. Who do I look to and go, maybe there's a better way? Because we're all doing the same thing. We're all living in the same rat race. Still today, God has called us to be set apart. That doesn't mean separated where we don't talk to people or love people or engage in the community. We are to live differently so that there's a way and a model in which people can look at and go, you're living in a way that brings wholeness and I'm not feeling whole. How do I get that? And that's our witness to Christ. I want to put it this way. This is one of the most important points to understand holiness. Holiness is not about your moral perfection. It is about single-minded devotion. It's about coming to a place where I am singularly devoted to something, to God, in a way that he brings my whole life out of compartmentalization into fullness and wholeness. And I'm going to give you an example of how that works. But here's my line for today that I want you to remember. To be holy God's, to give my life, my time, my passions to God is what will make us whole. Only a holy people can bring wholeness to others. If you look around and go, man, my family's falling apart, how do you become that place where they can find wholeness if you yourself are not being made whole? If you see people suffering from psychosomatic illness and you're in the same boat as I have been, how can I look at anybody else and go, hey, let me walk with you? Where am I going to walk? In circles? I'm doing the same thing. But let me walk with you and see what God is doing and can offer and do, because something has drastically changed. Today I want to look at Leviticus and their weird laws and ask this. Not, do I need to do what it says? Because these are cultural. These are based in a context and a story thousands of years ago. But they have a point, and when you read these things, you don't have to go, oh, this is the weird stuff, see, this is why I don't read the Bible. What you do is go, what did this mean to the people that it was writing? Because it still means that for us in our context, in a different way. I'm going to explain that, okay? So, if we look at Leviticus 19, this section is all about, these are like the center of the holiness laws. There's just tons of them, but it starts and it's about idolatry. It's about you're worshiping other things. You're loving other gods. You don't be like the people that you just came out of, whose lives fell apart, who did abhorrent things. You can't worship their gods and come out whole. You can't worship their gods and come out better. You're going to have the same outcome. So he gives them these laws. Don't worship idols. And he says this, keep my decrees. Do not mate different kinds of animals. Anybody doing that? I can pray for you now. You got a dog, cat? Do not plant your field with two kinds of seed. Do not wear clothing woven of two kinds of material. Do not cut the hair at the sides of your head or clip off the edges of your beard, Charlie. Pull square. It's supposed to be more free-flowing. Do not cut your bodies for the dead or put tattoo marks on yourself. Dang it. See? Sinner. I am the Lord. Okay, so let's get to my hypocrisy. What does this mean? We always joke because we have people we know really well that don't really go to church, and they don't live lives that are really anything like a Christian, but when I get a tattoo, they're like, you know you're not supposed to do that according to the Bible. I'm like, do we want to do this right now? Really? This is the verse you know? So what's going on here? Why are these weird? Why does this matter today? Here's what's going on. It's not about the literalism of it today. It's about what was God saying to his people? What did all these things represent? And at the very least, here's the best I can give to you, is that in the culture in which they were planted, surrounded by these people who did not know God, who were doing these child sacrifices and living crazy and killing one another, and they practiced these things that represented who they were. So they would have tattoos that represented the gods they worshiped, and they would mark their bodies with this idolatrous worship. And these gods it's not just like, oh, you worship your God. These gods were the ones commanding these evil things. And he's saying, don't align yourself. Don't look like them. Don't wear clothes that make it look like you're a part of that. Because if people think you're a part of that, you're going to be a part of that. Don't let people think you got to be different than this culture you're going into. You got to be separated from the way they practice things. They're doing weird things with animals. Don't do that. And then there's just all these things that are very similar. And so what is the essence and the point that is still relevant today? It is not about the tattoo. And I don't think anybody saw this and went, he must worship Moloch. I mean, the god of baby sacrifice. That's not the point. Because that's not my culture. But what is the point is, am I living, am I showing something today that says, I'm just like everybody else who doesn't know God. I practice the same things. I do the same things. Nothing has really changed, except I go to church. So today I want to look at what does it mean to be set apart. Number one, we are to be set apart, in this case, in our commitments. These tattoos, these ways we dress, these are signals and signs of what I'm committed to, what I'm devoted to. And we are to be different in the way we commit our lives if you're a believer. If you're not a believer, at least you're getting the idea of the call here. You are to be different in the way you commit your lives. Jesus is about to talk about in the Sermon on the Mount the depth of what marriage means and sexuality and adultery and all these issues. He's going to talk about your commitment to enemies and loving them. Like he's already done it once, he's going in deeper. But he's like, what are your commitments ultimately? Are you committed to pursuing a way of living that is so different than everything around you? What are you committed to with your time? What are you committed to with your money? What are you committed to? See, we often say, I committed my life to Jesus if you came to Jesus sometime at church camp. All right? September 1999. I committed my life to Jesus. But the bigger question is, in all of my practices, in the way that I devote my daily self, what am I really committed to? See, the people that God was running out of the land, their lives were committed to all of these different things that affected every part of social life. We often think of faith as like we go to church and then we have these other sections of our lives. That's not how it works. He says, if you're committed to God, every portion of your social life is going to change. Your social, your moral, your marriage, your reconciliation, the way you pursue peace with others, it's going to impact everywhere depending on what you're committed to. Now, if you're committed to winning, if you're committed to being right more than everybody else, if you're committed to fighting to get what you deserve, then that's going to affect every part of your social life as well. The way you work, the way you marry, the way you treat people. You are what you're committed to. So he says, if you live by the law of death, the law of the land, doing what everybody else does, the land will vomit you out. He says, worship God and money, and guess what's going to happen? If you try to go, hey, we're both gods, this is what Israel's doing. We're gods, but we also want to be like them with their money and their power and their kings and their gods and their blessings. We're going to hedge our bets. And that's our life. Why do I feel torn into? Why do I feel overwhelmed, overburdened, like everything's falling apart on me all the time? Because I'm stretched in every direction because my commitments are as well. I have not formed the whole of my social life around what I know I'm supposed to be with God. I've allowed everything else around me to seep in, and I'm trying to both be well off and successful in the American terms, and yet still maintain this goodness and righteousness, and still maintain my perfect family the way they would like it and the way I would like it. And I'm torn, always. Anxious, psychosomatically ill, always. Worship God and money, guess what happens? Money will rule you. That's what the scriptures teach. Worship luxury in God, and guess what is going to happen? You're going to be discontented with everything you get. Worship sex and romance and God at the same time, and sex will rule you until you can't find contentment in anybody, anywhere. And that's the thing. He's like, don't be divided. You're always going to end up getting vomited out by the nature of things in this world. It's not even about this command to be good, be good. It's like it's for your good because it's not working. So we are to be set apart in our commitments, and that's the question I'm challenging you to think through today. What am I really committed to? You know? What am I really putting on me that says this is what my life is about? What do I represent? That's what these laws are about. What do you represent? That culture or this one? And we are afraid to be different. Now, the second one is like it. This is also in Leviticus 19, but also in other parts of the Bible consistently. But we are to be set apart in our calendars. We are to be set apart in our commitments and set apart in our calendars. So in Leviticus 19, over and over again, it says you have to keep the Sabbath, keep the Sabbath, keep the Sabbath. In Exodus 28, it says this, remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. It's one of the 10 commandments. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. There it is. There's that word. Set apart. Remember the Sabbath day. What does this mean? He's saying you were made to live in a rhythm given by God, instilled in creation. On the first 7 days of creation, God rested. And that rhythm was made. And even if you choose to live apart from God or do whatever you feel, that rhythm is going to destroy you if you live outside of it. It's like vomit. You introduce something that you were never made for into your body, and it is going to fall apart. You were never made to work and never process and never sit and never rest and never be with God every week until you get a vacation. And everybody knows vacation is worse if you have kids. You come home and you're just like, gosh, I need a vacation from vacation. Thank God I get to go back to work on vacation from vacation. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. So the Israelites had festivals. They had sabbatical years in which they took time off of work to go, let's give this to God. They celebrated together on a consistent basis. Even our church attendance, and I know this is self-interest. I want you here at church. But it wasn't about church. It's like, are you in a rhythm to say, God, this is your time. This is your worship. I'm going to stop what I'm doing to make my life centered on you at the beginning and at the end of every week. Now, we do that in other parts of the week too, but at the very least, that I'm ending and beginning the bookend of my week with centering my life on what do you desire of me, God? My worship, my hope, my dreams. And therefore, everything I do in society after that is reflected in that. This isn't a small thing. Because one of the things that if you forget to do this, you forget God. That's what you'll see throughout the Old Testament. He says, you forgot. You forgot the Sabbath day. And it was like this big old sin. Why? Because they weren't just forgetting the Sabbath day. They were forgetting to be with God. They were forgetting to not be wrapped up. And the minute I forget God, I go right naturally back into what everybody else tells me to. And I'll tell you right now, I do it all the time. I forget the practices God has instilled in my life that has brought change to my life. And because things get overwhelming, I go back to just like running around, running my rat race. And then one day I go, I'm empty. I'm torn. I want to vomit. And I go, oh, crap. I didn't practice the very things that are so simplistic. I've been out of practice. I've been out of sorts. And I'm a pastor, y'all. I do this weekly. But it's not about preaching. That's work. It's about, am I sitting with God? Am I listening? Am I centering my week and my days on him? And the answer is no, and then naturally things are falling apart. It is so obvious. And so many times we go, oh, I know that, but we don't do it. But we have been called to be set apart like that, to be in community with people in a weird way, that we structure our lives around this. That's our commitment. That's our calendar. That is what the Christian life is. It's not raising your hand. It's not inner spirituality. It's about being consistently God's and letting our life be subject to him in so many ways. Friends, if you look around the world and you watch our teenagers struggling, and as I talk about all the time, you see the depth of their pain and their struggle and their illness, their mental health crises that we're in. If you look around and see the marriages falling apart around you and the constant just baggage and overwhelm that we experience here, and we don't ask, what is the way out of this? We've just been swallowed up by the world. We've just accepted that this is the way it is. And yet the simplistic thing here is that God has given us a different way to live that really does. It doesn't solve every problem, but it brings us hope and comfort in the middle of them. It gives us somebody who sustains us and brings us hope and joy and comfort in the middle of all the craziness of our lives. It changes our patterns. Who will look in and say, I need a place of refuge, and know where they can go? We cannot be the light of the world if we're mixed completely in with darkness. If we too are being so overwhelmed by the darkness. So how does being set apart, being different in our calendars, in our commitments, in our practices, in our worship, how does that make us whole? I want to give you an example. If you were an Olympian, okay, and you wanted to be the best of the best, everybody runs, everybody works out, everybody is an athlete that goes to the Olympics, but what sets apart the best of the best? A better example for me is basketball. If anybody's watched Kobe Bryant or know his story, he's some of the best of the best. If anybody's watched James Harden, he is not Kobe Bryant. What is their difference? James Harden's crazy talented. Kobe Bryant's crazy talented. Kobe Bryant is one of the greatest of all time. James Harden is 32 and almost washed up. Why? One spent every hour. He woke up at 4 a.m. for first workout, second workout at 2 p.m. Between that, worked and did practice. And he did this all the way through his career because he said, this is my one thing. This is the thing I'm devoted to. Now, I'm not advocating you should do that. That's idolatry too. But what he did is he's like, this is the thing I'm devoted to. While another loves to go out and party, drink, stay out late. Kobe Bryant had a bedtime and he woke up because everything was devoted to being committed to this one thing. An Olympian does the same thing. If I want to be at the top of my game, what does that mean about the way I eat? Now watch this. See, when you read the Leviticus, you go, well, that's weird. I can't eat this, not that three-footed, three-hooved animal. And you go, what is all this weird stuff? Now watch this. If you're an Olympian and you're training your body and your whole goal is to be the best, that's what you're single-mindedly devoted to this quest. What do you do about food now? You eating Chick-fil-A? Are you grabbing Twinkies? No, your body and your work and your eating is subservient to this greater thing. There is now unclean and clean foods. You see the distinction? There are things I can eat and the things I can't eat. And the people who don't follow this end up being divided and not very good at anything. The same thing goes with the relationships. If you're working towards being an Olympian, what happens to your relationships? You want people around you who are also trying to do it. Number two, at the very least, you can't be people around me in my life going, you shouldn't do that, you shouldn't do that, you shouldn't do that. I need people who support my devotion. And I'm not going to stay out and do whatever they want because I am committed. And I'm going to go home when I need to because I am committed. And my relationships will begin to be formed around this commitment. Do you see how one single-minded devotion actually changes every area of your life? The way you spend your money, the way you devote your time, your calendar, the way you eat, who you are with, who you give your life to. It changes everything. That's how you become whole. But in this case, it's the only one who can make us whole, who brings us salvation, who fulfills our spirit physically, emotionally, and eternally. You give your life to this thing, and it changes and orders everything under it to a way that it all makes sense together. But when I fail to do that, that's when I disintegrate. I disintegrate. When I am committed to all these different things, to going to clubs and trying to be the best NBA player, staying out late, drinking, and trying to be the best in my league, I end up being washed up and vomited out. And imagine if you were this Olympian and you had somebody come up who had never really succeeded and who was smoking and out of shape, had a milkshake in a hand, and he said, you know what you need to do to prepare for the Olympics? I got some advice. What would you do? Would you listen? No, you're going to look for somebody who's been there, who's struggled, who's failed, and has figured out how to keep the course, how to be set apart. You're going to look for somebody who's set apart. And that's going to give you a model of, now I'm seeing what I need to do. That's what God is saying in this text. He's like, I want you to live in such a way as a people, as individuals, but as a group. I want you to be so different that, yes, people at some point are going to say, what's wrong with you? Why aren't you doing this? You're being weird. Why do you spend your calendar days doing this instead of this? Like, why do you submit yourself? Why do you forgive people the way you forgive them? They don't deserve that. But at some point, the way we live is going to cause us this illness, this brokenness, this disintegration. And we need to be people that people look in and go, I saw you sick, but I saw you got well. How did you get there? And what did he say in Deuteronomy? God says through Moses, he says, people need to be able to look in and go, I've never seen wisdom like this. We're falling apart. We're being spit up. I've never seen wisdom like this. I've never seen a God come near the way your God comes near. Because you lived in such a way that it brought healing and wholeness to others. The only way I can bring wholeness to others is if I'm allowing God to bring wholeness to me. And why is this so hard? Like, I'm guessing nothing, unless you're new to this, none of this is new to you. Like, yeah, Sabbath, church, be good, don't do bad things, set apart, holy, 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 holy. Why is this so hard? And yet, maybe like me and so many of the people I talk to are like, man, I'm struggling, I'm suffering psychosomatic back issues, and I got all these, I'm vomiting, and every week I just go through this cycle, and, well, what are you going to do about it? What? Do about it? Why is it so hard to think about the drastic changes that have to come about? FOMO. That's the answer, FOMO. I don't want to miss out. I feel like if I change the patterns of my kids, if I don't do the cell phone, again, I'm going to harp on it 1,000 times, everybody knows it's destroying them. Every psychological study, everything we know on social media is destroying this generation. And you ask parents, what are you going to do about it? They're like, there's nothing we can do. I don't know. What would we do? Remove it? And they go, oh, no, they'll be angry. Yeah, they're addicted. That's what happens. But what happens? Why don't we do it? And I've struggled through it myself. I've done it, but it's hard. Why don't we do it? Because I don't want them to miss out. I don't want them to feel weird or different. I want them to feel happy and socially like they fit in. And yet there's not a parent I talk to who doesn't pinpoint that at least somewhere in their conversation that this has been an issue. And yet you ask, okay, so, well, there's nothing you can do about it. You know, every study in America is saying it's destroying their minds, but there's nothing that we can do about it. Why? Because I don't want to be weird, right? I don't want to be different. I don't want them to feel isolated. And that's true, I don't. So how do we overcome this? It's this fear that I'm going to fall behind, that I'm never going to meet up to standards of everybody else. I'm going to watch everybody else succeeding and getting the life that I thought I should have, and now I don't have it. And that's why I just keep doing the same things as everybody else. I don't want to be that different. So how do we overcome this? You are right. I don't want to be different either. Because if I'm doing this by myself, this is a recipe for failure. If I'm training for the Olympics by myself, that is a recipe for failure. If I'm trying to get healthy psychologically by myself, it is a recipe for failure. We were made to be different together. You were made to be different in a community. That's the essence of what this whole thing is talking about. You weren't made, often you'll hear this in church. You'll hear, you got to be different and live morally different, but not by yourself. And if you fail, don't feel bad. You weren't made to do that by yourself. We were made to be weird together. I like weird too. That's why I like you. I love you. I feel weird sometimes. But, and I struggle with loneliness. It's something I'm going through this stage of my life. I know nobody else is, but I'll talk about me. I struggle with loneliness. But you know what? It's because I wasn't made to be alone. I'm doing weird things in my life. I'm living a life that's a little different. And it does not work great to have a lot of friends the way I live. But that's why I so desperately need friends who believe and share the struggle, the pain of being a Christ follower, that are honest, that don't pretend like they have it all together. You don't belong with me if you have it all together. because I'm a mess, and it's fun. It's funny, too. I need people who suffer with me, and I need people who get where I'm heading and also push me and say, let's be greater, let's be different, let's change our commitments, let's change our calendars. Nick, you're getting back into the habits of those cultures that are falling apart. Don't go over there. Don't do it. I was not made to do this alone. We are to be set apart at our core together. And this is where Jesus comes in. He starts teaching the Sermon on the Mount. He says, this is not about you not murdering people. This is about what is the nature of your hearts. This isn't about you not just simply committing adultery. Yeah, you're not supposed to do that, but do you realize that your heart has been devoted to other things, that the very root of all of these gravest sins and all of this brokenness in humanity is actually at your core? It's what you believe matters most in your life that you've given yourself to. Your adultery, your abuse, none of that started there. It started here of what I've chosen to give my faith and life to. We are to be set apart together. Think about that. We are to be set apart, but together. There's a part of Scripture that constantly talks about, this is a weird phrase, but it goes with the laws of holiness. If anybody wants to be tripped out, there's tons of writings on circumcision in the Bible. It's a really big subject, one of the central ones. And you go, why? It was a distinctive quality that said, these are God's people. They are physically but spiritually different. And it set them apart. Okay? And that's what is at the root of all of this stuff. He's like, I want you, this is your mark that says you are mine and you are different. There's a part later on in the prophets where God is calling and speaking to his people, and he goes, you've done a lot of good things in church, but man, you guys are wicked at your core. He goes, you need not just a circumcision to say, look, I physically did good things. He says, you need a circumcision of the heart. He says, you need something that distinctively says, something is different within me. And that comes not by your good work, but by your devotion to Jesus. By your commitments and your calendars for Jesus. He is the one who begins to change the very core of who I am, and I don't do that by myself. I do that with him, and I do that with you. I do that with him, and I do that in community. And if I don't have either of those, I'm not changing at my core, and I'm going to consistently disintegrate, be divided, be in this constant state of, I don't know what to do, just life sucks all the time. I'm overwhelmed. So what Jesus is now saying, what we're going to go into next week, into the rest of the Sermon on the Mount is, yeah, you're supposed to be different in how you act and how you spend your money and how you serve the poor and how you love people, but it doesn't start there. It starts here. What are the commitments of your very person? Guys, I hope by now you know I screw up as much as anybody. Sin is within me. I am a self-centered person. But my commitment is this, when I see it in myself, is to go run to Jesus. That's the commitment in my heart. Not to my moral perfection, I am not. It is not about holiness as in I am morally perfect, because I am not. It's that when I see it in me, before I even do it now, do something that I'm going to regret, I look and go, I need to run to the person and change my calendars and change my commitments to this person. I am not committed to being good, I am committed to a person. Do you hear that? I am now committed to a person. I'm not committed to a series of laws and acts. I am committed to a person who changes every part of my life, like the Olympics. If I give myself single-mindedly to this person, it is going to be changing the way I relate in every area of my life. I don't need a list of things. I need this person, Jesus Christ. So in the New Testament, 1 Peter says this. He says, and I do this so you'll see that the Old Testament isn't just the Old Testament. It is always tied into the new. And this is after Jesus has resurrected, ascended, and the church has been planted. And 1 Peter says this, you, look at your neighbor, say, he's talking to you. Look at all your neighbors, say, he's talking to us. You, if plural, y'all. Good, all y'all. All right, y'all are a chosen people. I want you to hear these words. You are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, and you are a holy nation. So often we're looking to get our nation to be holy. All the meanwhile, you, who are believers and make up the church, are a holy nation. You are set apart differently from everybody else. We don't need other people to conform. We need to what God desires. And we will be the light for the world around us through Christ. Once you were not a people, but now you are a people of God. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. Everything's been changed for you. All that this grace has fallen upon you. Dear friends, I urge you as foreigners and exiles. Oh, you are weird. Oh, you don't belong. As foreigners and exiles, to abstain from sinful desires which wage war against your souls. It will vomit you out. Live such good lives. Watch it. Live such good lives among the pagans that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day he visits us. Do you see the tie all the way back to Deuteronomy? I want you to be so different. I want you to run to Jesus so often that it changes the way you do family life, that it changes the way you raise your kids, even though it's different, that it changes the way you do your calendars and you find rest, and you spend time with Jesus, and the way you talk, and the way you think, and the way you hope, and in your anxiety, the way you cling to hope, and in your hardships that you cling to joy. It changes the way you as a people live, that when people finally, they'll go, oh, those people are weird, but when something hits the fan, they look in and go, what are they doing different? I want to know this God. There's a goodness, there's a wisdom to this God. And you know why I think I'm afraid that the people, when I ask them, what are you going to do about it? The reason they can't come up with what should we do different? I mean, what can we do? Is because they don't really know anybody, believers or unbelievers alike, who really is doing anything different. They don't have a model. And that doesn't mean you're perfect. It means a model of, I too am suffering and have been anxious, and yet I have watched God do. I've changed this pattern that God has given me to be with him, and this person is changing me. And not just changing me as like an idea, but I've changed my calendars, my commitments, my money, the way I live because of my relationship to him. And you become a light to the world. A salt and light, as we've talked about. On the other side of it is Revelation, where John is writing this letter from God, and he's writing to this church, the church of Laodicea. And he says, I know your deeds, that you are neither hot nor cold. You're not committed to anything. You're living between two worlds. I wish you were either one or the other. So because you are lukewarm, you're neither hot nor cold, I will spit you out of my mouth. I will vomit you out. That's the hard message, is I don't even see it as like God being mean. It's like I don't belong. It's like anybody who's going for a refresher and gets a mouthful of salt, warm water, you're just like, ah! I'm not committed to anything with God. And therefore, I don't belong. I belong to the world. I don't belong to this thing he's trying to do. I say this not as a judgment. If anybody knows anything about me, been around for I have suffered from psychosomatic stuff, anxiety. But if I was still sitting there vomiting all the time going, hey, you need to see my doctor, it really works. How can I point anybody anywhere? You wouldn't listen. And it's not that I won't go through it again. It's not a once and for all. It's a lesson that I have forgotten to run to a person and to center my life around that person. And I promise you, I don't know a time in which, if it's pretty much like clockwork. If I'm doing well, and I mean emotionally and spiritually and communally, I probably am tight in my word with God, changing my calendars, changing my commitments, centering on Him. If I'm struggling, I've probably forgotten because life, has gotten crazy and hard. And it's pretty consistent. It's not that I'm doing anything bad. I just get back into the rat race. I get sucked in to the culture that I live in, my discontentments. But I at least can say, hey, I know a person that changes this thing. When you're ready, when you're tired of vomiting and you don't know why, when you're tired of having constant breakdowns, but you don't know exactly why, I too have had those. I'm not holy in the moral perfection sense. I'm just trying to be single-minded because when I get there, I know I'm double-minded, and it's pulling me apart. See, when we become Christ followers, we are called to be different together. The way men and women get along, the way sexuality is used and held up and expressed and experienced, the way races get along together in this church matters because it's different than the world. The concern for the poor is different than the world if we're believers together. The way you spend your money on yourself, the way you give it away, it has to be different than everybody else. But it doesn't mean you have a laundry list of things to do. The closer you get to this person with your calendars and your commitments, it changes the way you eat, it changes the way you think, it changes the way you give, it changes the way you hope, it changes the way you forgive, because of this person, Jesus Christ. So ask yourself, does the world look into redeemers? And I hope you consider yourself a part of that and say, look at how unselfish they are. This is different than what we're experiencing out here. Look at how their racial groups get along. This is different than what's going on out in the streets out here. Look at how they spend their money. Look at how they speak with grace for people who have broken down and are in sin and are hurting. Because there's something different about those people who've experienced mercy and grace. As I'm closing, I want us to think about how do we get there? Holiness. Jesus is about to teach us some very hard things. And he's going to up the ante. And I don't want you to come in and go, gosh, this is so overwhelming, I can't do it. Because the answer, I'm going to give you you don't even have to come to church, I'm going to give you the answer. It's always going to be like, what's Jesus doing in your heart? But you need to hear it over and over again, because every time you walk out those doors, you get into the calendar of the world and you forget. And you forget that without this person changing my heart, I'm going to go right back into a world that's going to vomit us out. So this is what Jesus prayed for his disciples, those who would follow him. He says, and not just those with him, but all of you who claim to know him. Here's what he prayed to God for you before he left. Make them holy by your truth. Teach them your word. Do you see the centrality of that? The practice of just hearing from Jesus. I loved Ann's quote last week from Priscilla Shire. If you say, I want to hear from God, I want him to change me, I want him to speak to me, and you don't want to read his word, you don't want to hear from God. Jesus himself says, he wants God to make you holy. I want to make you different. I want to make you set apart and whole. Teach them your word. That's the way to start. Teach them your truth. That's going to change the way they see the world. Just as you sent me into the world. He's talking to God. I am sending them into the world. See, he doesn't say be different, go live in a commune somewhere. He says be different as I send you out into the world. And I give myself as a holy sacrifice for them so that they can be made holy by your truth. Why did Jesus die according to him? So that you can get to heaven by the skin of your teeth? Is that why? Not according to him. So that you can be made holy by his truth. You can be made whole, integrated. That your life is centered within this person who changes every area, eternally and now. And if you feel divided, as I do often, if you feel like you're constantly carrying this weight and burden of the world and others and pains and anxieties, all I can say is it is a disintegration of all the things that just pull at us all the time, but we don't have them we don't have them together, integrated together under this aim and this person and this purpose for our life. We're living at odds within ourselves. What Jesus is saying is, I was all in for God when I went to the cross. That when I was hurting, when I was bleeding out of my brow out of the anxiety and fear that I was living in, this is Jesus. When I did not want to live in the pain that I was experiencing in this world, I still said, I am committed, single-mindedly devoted and holy to God. I am God's. I am wholly God's. And because I have done that, I've done that so that you can be made holy. You can be made whole by his truth. So when I go to change my calendars and come to church and Sabbath on Sunday and spend time and change the way my family operates and change the way my teens use phones, and it's not so I can be good. It's so that we can devote our hearts more fully and more wholly to God. It's so that I can center my mind and my hopes every week in a calendar more wholly on God, believing in faith that he's the one who makes me whole. Believing that ultimately he will make us whole. If I just take away my kids' phones and don't replace it with just like being in their lives with Jesus, it helps. But it's not transformational. It'll just make them resentful. You have to replace it with a different pattern of people together, of community, of friendships with Christ. You have to replace it with a different way of being, not just remove it. You get that? No? And when we do that, we become a place that people and others look in. And when it's all falling apart, they say, they seem to be people who struggle like me, but they have a peace. They seem to be people who have divisions, but they have become reconcilers. They figured out how to forgive, how to let go of losses, how to suffer with others in love and still have joy. To be holy God's is what will make us whole. That's what I want you to remember. To be holy God's is what will make us whole. It is only a holy people who can bring wholeness to others. Friends, I'm going to pray for us, but at some point we have to decide what we're going to do with our lives and make a different change. Instead of constantly, if that's you in any way, that you go, I just keep going through the cycle, it's the same thing, I just keep getting pulled in every direction, this burden, and everything's converging, and I'm constantly stressed, and I have all these weird illnesses, but everybody tells me I'm fine when I go to the doctor. If that's you, at some point you have to ask that question, what are we going to do, and who is the model for doing this? And you know what? It's going to be so simplistic. It's just, will you do it? Will I center my life in a community of people together on Jesus? Will I change my calendars? What are you willing to change? There's a coaching question we ask when we're working with people to try to change their lives, and it's, what are you willing to give up so that you can get to what you say you want? What are you willing to change so that you can get this thing you say you would like to have? Peace and wholeness and family that's healthier. What are you willing to give? What are you willing to change in your commitments? And maybe at the very least, it's starting with this. Just join with others in prayer and the word and the truth of God and be consistent, because that's your commitment. And when things interfere, you go, this is my commitment. And when you're going through the dumps, that's your commitment. Run to the person of Jesus with others. That's faith. Faith in holiness. It is not that I am so perfect. It is not that I am so good. It's that when I know I am not, I know who I run to. That's what faith is. I know where I go. That's my commitment. And when I realize that I'm going to torn apart and vomited out by this world, I know who I run to. I know my physician. And when I'm tired of going back and forth, I know the patterns that I've got to live in, and that's with this person. Will he become the center of your week? Will he become the center of your friendships and your community? Will he become what you put in your mind with his word? The faith is that I believe your wisdom changes lives. Do you guys believe that? Do you believe that the wisdom of God brings wholeness? How many of you are committed to being in that? With others. In community. Are you committed to that? See? Silent. I haven't even thought about that. That's where we have to get. This isn't the best preach. I know it. It's okay. But it is important. It's huge, actually. Because if you don't change this, you're going to go through the same patterns over and over again. And I'm going to talk to you and share with you and sympathize with you over and over again when you come in. Everything might be fine today, but it won't be in a month. And it's just going to be the pattern over and over again. And we're going to keep going. I don't know what to do about my kids and about my family and I'm going to keep pointing us all, including myself. Hey, what are you committed to? What do you really believe? Do you have faith that his word transforms lives? And if so, are you in it? Is that the center of your week? Is that calendared into your life? Does that systematize the way you live with your family? Or does everything else take precedence? If your kids' feelings and sports and your job takes precedence, you're not committed. You don't believe that his wisdom is what makes wholeness in this world. And then you and I cannot be a light to others who are suffering and our friends who are suffering. It is not to be holy so that I am weird and don't talk to people. It's to be holy so that I can show people that this is the way to God's wisdom and fullness. That's what we need to be as a church, and it starts as a gathering. You cannot do it by yourself. F, will you play this song? I want you to pray. If you want to leave, I'm going to pray. You can. I know that people have things to do. But I'm going to encourage you to listen to this song and pray and ask God, what are my commitments? What is my calendar? And what's going on in my core? What do I really have faith? And if you want to leave, don't anybody judge them. People got things to do. But at the very least, make Sunday count. This is about your soul, about your mind, and your Jesus. And if you don't know Jesus, ask him. Am I torn apart by this world? Do you have the answers? Do you have the wisdom? Speak to me. We're going to play this song that I love, and I just want you to pray. That's it. All right? Go. Sometimes I am nervous to push church things because it just seems so like it's like my thing and I'm just trying to get you to do this. But guys, it's a simplistic thing. We need to be a community of believers that's consistent. Coming out of COVID's been so hard to get back into life and schedules. But part of our commitment is to be in that rhythm of people who push us forward, to be continuing to edify ourselves in Jesus. There's a heart issue, and you need to go home and pray through that and ask God, like, what do you want to do in me? What do you want to change in me? And I do it all the time because I see stuff in me, and I go, okay, I'm committed to you. What do you want to do different? But there's also a practical issue. Will you at least be committed to show up and worship God? Will you at least be committed to gather with others and worship and pray and see his word and enjoy it? And trust that that will begin to shift if you are willing to commit to that. It's going to change the way we operate as a people, the way we believe, the way we think. It's going to change your marriage if you do it with consistency, that this is what I'm committed to. God is so different, so set apart that he will change our lives. And he makes us holy. He makes us holy. Our job is to commit, is to be invested into that. Doesn't mean you're to be perfect. It means when you're not, you know the person who is. Amen? And I give my whole heart and my mind and my commitment to him and trust him that he's the one who brings wholeness and salvation. Amen? May God's grace and peace be with you this week.